Hello everybody out there in the bookverse, it's Stephanie, and today I am back with my January wrap-up. I think January was a pretty good reading month for me. I ended up reading 7 books, which is a decent number for me. Sometimes I get up to like 10 or 11, sometimes I'm as low as 5, so I think 7's somewhere a little bit in the middle. Plus I had a lot of books that I really loved this month, so I think quality over quantity is something I definitely am striving for this year. If you're new to my channel, hey, welcome. Thank you so much for watching my videos. If you'd like to see more from me, definitely hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon so you'll be notified when I post new content. But let's jump into these books because I have some really good ones to talk about. The first 2 I think I'm going to just combine together because they are in a series, and that is The Dragon Republic and The Burning God, both by R.F. Kuang. These are the 2nd and 3rd books in the Poppy War trilogy, so these... almost dropped them. These concluded out the series. Now, you guys know that I absolutely adored the Poppy War. I thought it was so good. It was so well written, just like drew you into the story and made you feel so many things for these characters. And I think that that definitely continued in both of these books. So this series is very heavily inspired by true events that happened in Chinese history. It follows a young girl named Rin who is from a poor part of her country, and she is supposed to be married, but she decides to take this test instead. She passes it, gets into this very prestigious military academy and trains there, and then we get her time there training, and then we get into the actual war that happens. So that's how this series starts, and it is very military based. There's so much strategy and just fight scenes, battle scenes within this series, and I absolutely love it. It's so well written. Oh, it's so good. In this one, I feel like I started out very frustrated with Rin, and I had very frustrating moments with her throughout the entire book, which I think is kind of a common theme throughout this series. You don't always feel that Rin is making the best decisions. You feel like she is doing some really dumb things, and she definitely could be doing things differently, but I did still definitely enjoy this book so much. One of my main complaints about it, honestly, was that about half of this book, the magic was not really in it, and that's something that I loved in this series was the magic. So the first half of the book was still very enjoyable. I liked the military aspects of it, but I just didn't like that the magic wasn't at the forefront. That's something that I loved and that I was really looking forward to getting more of after the first book, and then having that taken away for like the first, 200-300 pages of this book was definitely frustrating for me. Also, I felt like so many poor decisions were made and you could see so many things coming. I saw most of the twists come that were coming, not all of them. Some of them definitely came out of nowhere, but it was just a little bit frustrating that the characters couldn't see what was coming and they were making decisions that were very annoying. A character that I was very excited was more prominent in this book was the Empress. I think she is such an interesting and intriguing character, so I definitely enjoyed having more of her in this series. And then The Burning God. I know that this book is fairly divisive, and I feel like I am landing on the side of I did not love the ending. I thought it was a good book overall. I enjoyed myself while I was reading it. I was definitely invested. That's something that the series does really well, is it draws you in and makes you have to know what happens because it is so engaging and so many high stakes things are happening pretty much constantly. So that's something I absolutely love in this series. I thought the magic in this was so good. I loved that. I thought it was great. I just didn't enjoy how it ended. I don't want to give away spoilers, so I can't really go too much into that. I just felt like the ambiguity surrounding it was something that I did not enjoy. I didn't really enjoy the fact that it felt like it changed a lot of the things that had happened before in the series. It made it a little frustrating for me. But overall, I still really love this book, and I adore this series so much. It is amazing. It is so well written. It knows how to like get at your emotions and really make you feel things and see the horrors of war and just kind of life in general, sometimes especially when you're living in poverty or in a place that is considered lesser and not really regarded as people almost. That was looked into a lot in this series, and I think it was really well done. It just looks so much into Rin as a character and her development and seeing her grow and change. And it's very fascinating to get inside her head, but also very frustrating at the same time. Rin is one of those characters that I feel like you love and you just want to strangle. But overall, the series was amazing. I would give this series overall 5 stars, but I feel like the first and second books I enjoyed more, and then most of this book I enjoyed quite a bit, but then there is a chunk of it that I just did not love. So this one, I think I would give 4 stars to, unfortunately, but I did overall adore the series. Highly, highly recommend it, but know going in that there are a lot of trigger warnings. I cannot list them all here, but I would definitely look into that if you do feel like you might be triggered by some of these things. There are so many things in here that are brutal and horrible and could definitely cause some anxiety or triggering situations for people. The next book I'm going to talk about is another conclusion to a series, which I am very proud of. That's one of my goals this year, is to read and finish the series that I've already started, because I have so many going. And the series I finished is The One, Chronicles of the One by Nora Roberts. This book, The Rise of Magix, is the 3rd and final installment in that trilogy. This trilogy starts out with a worldwide pandemic that kills about like 75 or 80% of the population, and if you get it, it is 100% fatal. And some people never get it, never have any symptoms, and then some people end up developing magical abilities around the same time as well. And so we see the divide in people, where the people who don't have magical abilities are sometimes prejudiced against the people that do, and we also just kind of see the human experience of trying to survive after your world is torn apart by a pandemic like this, where it just kind of changes everything. So ultimately, this book circles around to this girl who is born and is supposed to save the world. She is the chosen one, and this pandemic is fantastical. It is not a normal one. It comes from dark magic, and she is the light magic that is there to combat that. Now, this conclusion was good. I feel like it was a very satisfying conclusion. It wrapped things up really well. I do feel like Nora Roberts is not the best at writing battle scenes, which is not necessarily shocking. I read a lot of high fantasy with lots of fight and battle scenes where I've seen it very well done. So it's hard to compare in a book like this where that's not exactly the main forte of the author, and we know that going in. But I still did really enjoy it. I liked a lot of the characters, and I think that the development that you see in these characters is very interesting in these books, and just the way that the world has turned. I did enjoy that a lot. I think some of the twists were really good and I didn't see them coming, and I do love that in books when you just don't know that something is going to happen and it throws you off in the best way, and I think Nora Roberts does that very well. I also think she does a really good job at looking into people in general, getting deep inside their psyche and into their emotions and their feelings, and that's something I enjoyed in this series. I think overall it was just a decent series for me. It's not a new favorite, but I still did really enjoy it, and I think I will continue on with other books by Nora Roberts. I'd like to jump into maybe some of her romance or some of her lighter fantasy books, maybe ones that are like more traditional witches and they are more focused on the romance side of it. I think that would be really interesting. So I'm definitely going to continue with Nora Roberts. I think she's a great author. I just think that my taste in the way some of these things were done is just different. The next book I'm going to talk about is another continuation of a series, guys. I am killing it in January. That is A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 3rd installment in the ACOTAR series. So this is kind of the conclusion to the trilogy, almost, but then there is a fourth book that's just like a short story or novella or something that goes along with it, A Court of Frost and Starlight. And then there is a new one coming out that is A Court of Silver Flames, which is going to be following Nesta as the main character instead of like Feyre and Rhysand. So I don't know. I'm kind of considering this a conclusion to it, but I still am planning on reading the next two books. This series starts off following Feyre, who is a human girl. She kills a Fae and then has to go and live in the Fae world as punishment for this, because you're not supposed to kill the Fae, apparently. It is a Beauty and the Beast retelling in that first one. It's heavy on the romance aspects. It's very angsty. You have some like almost cringeworthy moments, but I actually really enjoyed the first book in this series. I think that was it was definitely my favorite out of all the books. I think as it goes on, I'm liking it less and less, which is kind of an unpopular opinion. I feel like almost everyone likes the second book, ACOMAF, better than ACOTAR, but this one definitely was another step down for me, kind of along the same lines as with the Chronicles of the One. I didn't feel like the battle scenes and the fight scenes were that well done in this series. Especially in this book where they are very prominent and important. It didn't feel as well developed. I didn't think that the military side of it was that interesting to me, because I didn't feel like it was written in a way that was extremely engaging. I feel like you're really more focused on the romance sides of things and the different like characters in this book. The plot was fairly interesting, but I wasn't quite as invested in it, honestly. I just didn't care all that much about it. I don't really like a lot of the characters. I think a lot of them are just so extra and over the top and way too like dramatic and angsty for me. I just am not into that a lot of the time. It was an interesting book though. It had a interesting plot, fun to follow, very easy read. I think some of the characters I enjoyed a lot. It's just our main character, Feyre, was okay. I don't love Rhysand. I think he's fine, but I think the emphasis on him being just like, he's so misunderstood and he's such an amazing person and no one knows it, and oh, poor him, he sacrificed so much, just drove me nuts. It was way too much, especially in this book, and it reminded me a little bit of Midnight Sun, which, can't stand that book. So I didn't love this one that much. It also had a trope in it that I absolutely hate. I can't tell you, I just did not like the ending. I thought it was so dumb. I think that the stakes were so low throughout this entire series, and it just drove me nuts. Like, how am I supposed to get invested if I feel like the stakes are that low? Anyways, I think this is like a 2 or 3 star for me. It's not wonderful, but I did want to finish the series because I do want to read A Court of Frost and Starlight when it comes out, but this is definitely not my favorite in the series. The next book I'm going to talk about is the one and only middle grade on this list. I read it for Middle Grade Monthly, which is hosted by Jade at JD Ray Reads and Gavin at How to Train Your Gavin. That is Keeper of the Lost Cities. This is by Shannon Messenger, and the reason I decided to actually jump in on this Middle Grade Monthly and read this book is because I work at a children's hospital, and I had a patient on the cancer unit, and when I went in there, she was reading, I think it was the 7th book in this series, and so I kind of chatted with her a little bit about that. She absolutely loves the series, and I feel like it just kind of drew me more towards it, and when I saw it was the Middle Grade Monthly pick, I decided I would jump in and join them with it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, honestly. It was hard for me to get into in the beginning. There were some parts that were very weird and unbelievable, and like the emotions that were going on in this situation didn't seem to match the situation. I don't want to say too much, don't want to get into spoilers, but this book is about a young girl who finds out that she is actually an elf and is taken away to live in the elf world, and she finds out that she has these special powers and that she has secrets locked inside her brain. It just took me so long to get invested in it. I think like the first half, I was considering DNFing it. I wasn't positive I wanted to continue with it, but then it picked up and I started getting more invested in the characters. I loved some of our side characters. I mean, her little friend is so cute and so sweet. I think he's one of my favorites. I absolutely love the doctor in this book. He is such a funny, interesting character, and I love that. I think something this book did well is keeping you in suspense as to who was a traitor. It was kind of hard to tell. One person that I was almost positive was going to be a traitor and a bad guy ended up not being a bad guy, so it definitely threw me for a loop there. There were some plot twists that I found very interesting. Most of it was fairly predictable though. I mean, it is a middle grade, and also I think it's like 10 plus years old, so it has a little bit of that datedness to it as well. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's like a 3-star for me. I got very emotionally invested during part of it towards the second half, and I think I'm going to really enjoy the series. I hear it just gets better and that this author just improves as she goes, so I'm very excited to continue with this series. The next book is also a series continuation. I feel like I killed it in January. Oh, I'm so proud of myself. That is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 3rd book in her Ember series. Ember Quartet. So this is the 3rd book in her Ember Quartet. The first one is An Ember in the Ashes, which starts out following this young girl named Laia, who is a scholar, and her people are oppressed and slaves of these people called the Mariners, who came in and conquered them. And she is trying to go undercover and gain information so that she can rescue her brother, who has been captured. Then we also have another perspective, who is Elias. He is a Mariner warrior. He is one of their elites, and he is kind of questioning the things that he is doing, whether they're right, whether it's okay, and he wants out. So this world is very interesting. I really enjoyed the world development in here. It's kind of a Roman inspired fantasy world. It's very brutal. They are very warlike, and the scholars are very oppressed. There's definitely interesting magical turns and twists that come into this book that I really, really love. I love how the magic is going. I love magics that kind of involve jinn and those like different mythological creatures. I love it so much. And this book I did enjoy. I think it was really good. I think that the battle and fight scenes are very well done in this book. You get really invested in the characters and wanting them to survive and wanting them to just be victorious and come out on top, because the bad guy, well, one of the bad guys, there's multiple people that we don't like in this series, but one of the bad guys is just so horribly evil. Like, she's such a horrible person, and you're like, this is insane, but she's such a good bad guy because she's so complex and you learn more and more about her, and I love that. I love getting into the head of the villains in books, and also the like big bad when we get more and more into his story. That is so fascinating to me. I absolutely love how well Sabaa Tahir does that, getting you to have all these emotions surrounding these characters that are just actually being pretty horrible and evil and like pretty unforgivable, really. But in this one, I definitely did get fairly frustrated with the characters, especially one in particular. It just felt like the way they were going, you could see the bad that was going to come out of it. It was just so glaringly obvious, and their selfishness took over and just made things so much worse for everyone. I mean, thousands died because of selfish actions of some of these characters, and it kind of drove me nuts a little bit. So that's something that bugged me a lot in this book, but I still absolutely loved it. I cannot wait to get to the 4th and final book in the series, which is Sky Beyond the Storm. Already reading that, loving it, very excited to see the conclusion to this series, and yeah, I love this series so much. I would highly recommend it. It's a great YA fantasy. It's very easy to get into, and it's easy to read, fast-paced, and just something that can like be a nice palate cleanser, I think, from some of the more deep and heavy high fantasy books. And the final book on this list was the Shelf Space book club pick for this month, and I loved it. Oh my gosh, City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett was so good. Guys, I love this book so much. This is the first book in his Divine Cities trilogy. This series is kind of a little hard to explain. I feel like it is set in this world where the people who live on the continent used to be ruled by and looked over by these gods, and they made these people so they were practically invincible and they were just dominant over all the other peoples. They conquered, they enslaved, and they lived these nice cush lives pretty much. I mean, we learn more as we go. And then this island people who had been their slaves, they were considered like pretty much dirt and like they were worth nothing, find a way to kill these gods, come conquer these people, and they are now ruling. So we are at that point now where the island people have conquered and killed these people, and now they are ruling over them. This is like 75 years later or something, and we're seeing the after effects of it, how the continent has kind of been decimated by this. They are so much behind in their technology and their knowledge, and they are no longer allowed to even talk about their gods or their history, so that is holding them more in the past because they just can't let go of it. And then this man is murdered, and our main character comes in to try to figure out what happened to him, and so much ensues. I loved this book. The twists in it were phenomenal. I think the world building was just exceptional. You were drawn into this. You had to know what happened. I absolutely love the characters in this book. They were very well developed, very fleshed out, and I loved Sigurd. I think that's how you say his name.
Oh, he is seriously my favorite.
I hope that in the rest of the books we get so much Sigurd because he is such an amazing character. I'm in love with him. He's the best. I just adored this story overall. I think that the magic was so interesting. Just trying to piece things together and predict what was going to happen was really, really fun throughout this book. I don't do that all that often in books. I don't try to figure out the twist necessarily, but this one was so much fun to just try to guess, try to see if you could see what was going to happen because it was so interesting. It's kind of a murder mystery, little bit of a thriller fantasy book that was so much fun. I would definitely highly recommend this book. It's a really fast-paced book as well. I flew through this. It was a good time, guys. So I would highly recommend City of Stairs by Robert Jackson Bennett. It was just really good. I think this is probably my favorite read of January. Just like overall enjoyment wise, I really loved it. And those are all the books that I read in January. I feel like this video has gone on really long and I've kind of rambled a lot because I really enjoyed so many of the books that I read this month and I just couldn't stop gushing. So sorry about that. But if you have made it to this part of the video, I'm impressed. 1, 2, let me know down below what your favorite read of 2021 has been so far and any books that you might recommend to me based on the ones that I loved here in this video, especially City of Stairs, which was. And as always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.